start recording. Yeah. Well, excellent. Bueno, hola a todos, muy bienvenidos. Mi nombre es Miguel Martín, soy el director ejecutivo de ADVA, la Asociación de Desarrolladores de Videojuegos de Argentina. Les doy la bienvenida al ciclo de webinars. Hoy nos va a estar acompañando Alex Kikuchi, él es evangelista de Unity, y en la sesión de hoy nos va a estar contando sobre Shadergraph digamos, para juegos de PC. Ahora voy a switchar a inglés, voy a hacer mi mejor esfuerzo, porque Alex no habla español como habíamos anticipado. El webinar de hoy va a ser en inglés. Y bueno, first of all, Alex, thank you so much for your time and your good wave, buena onda, como decimos, boa onda, acompañarnos, que no me acuerdo cómo se dice la palabra.
Sí.
Yeah,
Consigo
okay.
comprender español, sí, no hay problema.
Perfecto. Bien, la estás haciendo fácil, bien ahí.
Sí, sí, gracias.
Bueno, es un placer enorme. It's a very pleasure to have you here. Well, the guys are coming, as I told you before, and this session will have your presentation around 40-45 minutes, and after that, at the end, well, some Q's and A's from the community, okay? And we are recording the session, and next weeks we will sharing also with the community.
Okay, great. Thank you. Muchas gracias, Miguel.
All of you, thanks you.
No, muchas gracias. Sí, yo consigo comprender español, hablar también, pero para charlas es un poco más difícil. Entonces, yo, inglés es mejor para charlas, principalmente charlas técnicas. Tech talks.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
So I'm switching out. Thank you, Miguel. It's always, a pleasure to be here and, to talk with your community, with the Argentina developers. Can I share my screen now? I have.
Yes, of course.
Okay. No worries. Let me check here which one. Okay. I think you can see me. You can see the slides. Let me move this to the other side.
Perfect. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So, yeah, thank you again for organizing this. I hope we can, try to do this in a monthly basis, and I can bring, always something new. And what I'm going to show today is very new. It's something very new that I'm creating, and with my team. And I'm not going only to show a few things about Shadergraph, but actually discuss about the project. It's a vertical slice. And then, exclusively for other members, we are going to share this project with, with the developers if you want to. And okay, let me just check here, everything's set. Oh, before I start, just, we are all in home. I'm in my home. So sometimes things may happen, like I have a small son, I have a small kid, and sometimes some noises may happen. It's not really, often or normal, but it can happen, just to let you all know. I'm in my office, in my home here, but just make sure that if something happens, I know just strange noises, it's because of my son. And I hope you all are safe. And today, let's talk about URP Word is the name of the project, but also we're going to discuss a little bit about Shadergraph. Si tiene preguntas, puede hacer en español también, ¿ok? No precisa, no necesita ser en inglés. Pero la charla yo voy a hacer en inglés. So my name is Alexandre Kikuchi. you can call me Alex too. I'm a tech evangelist for Latin America. We'll have some news soon regarding our teams and some new, good changes that are happening inside. And I've been using Unity for 10 years, more or less. And I created some nice projects, and it's really great to see how Unity evolved, especially with the Shadergraph. I'm not a shader programmer, so Shadergraph came in handy for me, like in a very good moment and good time. And today I'm going to show a project. It's not like 100% finished, but the main gameplay, the core elements are finished. And this project I use for many different talks because there are some things, some different features that I really want to show and explain in the same game. Okay. I hope everyone can hear me well. So let me change my
Yes,
slide.
perfect, Alex.
Okay, great. Thank you. Muchas gracias. And so this is our agenda. We're going to do a quick review on the materials. Let me go full screen here. I think it's better. Okay. We're going to, I don't know how to make this. Okay. Sorry about that. We're going to do a quick review on materials. What are materials? How can we use them? And then we're going to do a quick review on Shadergraph. So one of the things I want to show here today and discuss is not really in depth with Shadergraph, because we do have many good talks about this already, and I'm going to provide you the links. Right? Today, the goal is to have hands-on, to really see how we can apply in a real game. Miguel, una pregunta. Can you see this pop-up window that's showing here, or you can't? There's a pop-up here showing here on Zoom. You can see that, right?
No, I can't.
Oh, okay, great, because it's in the middle of the slides, and I don't know how to close it unless I click the button, but it's okay. Thank you, no worries.
Okay, no problem.
So, just sorry all, just to make sure I'm showing the correct screen here. Okay, so and next, after checking about Shadergraph, we're going to do the hands-on. So I'm not going to stay on the slides. I'm actually going to spend more time in Unity Editor, showing you the game, the Shadergraph elements, and how can we work with it instead of just showing a bunch of slides. So I believe doing this and interaction with you a little bit more, it's really good for you to understand some use cases, some real use cases for Shadergraph, or how can you apply in your own game. And after that, and I'll provide you some links with the resources like more talks or some really nice articles from our blog, and then you can learn much more, like not just about what I'm going to show here today, but what really is a specific feature from Shadergraph, because it's already available, and then there are many use cases already. So first, on materials. I'm not sure if you that are here connected right now or checking later the video is familiar with Unity, or it's if you're a beginner. I'm not going to explain Unity Editor or the very basic features of Unity. I'm just going to review a little bit about materials and Shadergraph. So don't worry if you don't understand right now. Just check our webpage, our Learn page, and I'm sure you're going to learn all this very fast. Okay, so today's it's a review of a few things, and then we're going to check Shadergraph in a real vertical slice. So if you're a very beginner with Unity, I recommend you to check the documentation first, some tutorials, and then you can come back to the talk later. But just stay with me. Let's see. It's not complicated what I'm going to show. It's actually very simple. So first, materials. I believe most of you know what a material is, and it's pretty much like when you have an object. It can be any kind of game object in your scene, in your project. It will need a material to show, to render in our screen. So pretty much is to define how an object is displayed in our scene or in our game view. So properties determined by a shader. What does that mean? When we want a material to render something, we need shaders to actually configure and show what are those settings, so we can actually show it in our screen. You know, we can actually render. So it starts with a default lit or simple lit shader if you're using Universal Render Pipeline. If you're using the high definition render pipeline, it's going to be another shader. So these are the default ones for the latest Unity version or since 2018. If you're still on Unity 5 or before that, probably you are using built-in renderer. So this talk will cover pretty much on the Universal Render Pipeline. So that's why I'm calling URP word. And but if you have a project on high definition render pipeline, you can also use Shadergraph and check all these materials. It's very similar. And then materials you can also create in an editor. If you want to just create from scratch and apply it to a game object or any kind of renderer, or you can do it during runtime. So more information about documentation, this is the link. But just to remember what is actually a material, how can you create it? So you can see here in this image. And here, one of the details in the inspector inside your Unity view. Okay, so very basic about materials very quickly. And Shadergraph. So if you don't know Shadergraph at all, and Shadergraph is just a new way for us to create shaders without programming, without doing any coding. Because right now it's pretty much node-based, as you can see in the picture on our right. And I'm a programmer, but I was not a shader programmer before, so I could not create those really beautiful and amazing shaders. And I always had to rely on someone or ask for help or hire someone to do it, because that was not actually my specialty. And right now with Shadergraph, anyone can create really amazing shaders. And I really mean anyone. Like if you're an artist, if you're a programmer, if you're a designer, and it's pretty much already available. I'm going to discuss about this very soon. So what does that mean? What is a Shadergraph? Let me review here. My window is flashing. Okay, so imagine that before you need to do all those programming, those codes, and you can just connect nodes, and it works already with our script or render pipelines. So as I told you, Universal Render Pipeline and High Definition Render Pipeline, HDRP. It's a visual shader editor, and as you can see in your right, so it has another window when you create a shader and when you open it. We're going to see in the editor very soon. It's node-based, so it pretty much creates nodes and connects with all them together and between them. And when you connect, you can see instant results in your screen. Also, you can access through code. So that's one of the main points of this talk today. We're going to see how to use and how to actually call it from code and to blend inside our gameplay. Also works in mostly all platforms right now. It's pretty much optimized. So there's also a link here if you want to know a little bit more about Shadergraph, what we had today. But also, imagine that, let me change here. If you're creating or in the middle of your project and you already use the latest Unity version, you already have Shadergraph if you on Universal Render Pipeline. So that means it's already a verified package. So imagine that again, you have a project, and usually our projects takes, I don't know, 3 months to 1 year, 2 years. It's already in LTS, so you be sure that you'll be covered for bugs and fixes and more updates. It's ready for production, so you'll not be surprised by any major bugs or something that might happen. It's going to break your game. And that means, again, new updates, no data break. So if you are in the, I believe it's the latest version 7.3, and if the team upgrades to 7.4, 7.5, your graphs will be preserved. You're not going to lose your graphs if you're starting right now. Okay, and of course, if you started already with the verified package production, which was 7 something or 6 something, I don't remember the number right now, but it's also going to be upgraded if you change right now the version of your project. So don't worry about that, okay? And more in our package manager, I'm going to show in my unit project how we can do this. So don't worry about this. We just reviewing some stuff. This is the link for also the documentation if you want to check more. And one other thing is part of what we do with Shadergraph, and I believe one of the most powerful things in Unity is how easy you can connect different game objects. You have the prefabs and now nested prefabs, and now you have subgraphs in Shadergraph. That means you can create those what we call in subgraphs to be reused in other graphs. And you don't need to do it all again. You can pretty much share what you did with some other graphs, some other parts of your materials. We're going to also to see a little bit about this. Okay, so subgraphs are just another graph but nested, and it can be nested indefinitely. That means there are limitations if you do it, I don't know, hundreds of times, but you can pretty much nest one to another and create really some amazing connections to that. It has some great reusability. It will improve your team workflow. So if you're working on a subgraph and you change it, it's going to be upgraded for the entire project. Okay, and it's very good for organization. Sometimes when you're working with nodes, your graph can be very big. And your graph can sometimes be a little bit confusing because it gets big, so many nodes all connecting between themselves. And well, you can group these graphs and subgraphs, divide them, and connect to others. So that means a much better organization in your project. Okay, so a little bit more on the nodes in this link. And this was a quick overview about materials, what a shader graph is. And as I told you, I'm not going to explain each part of what we have in the nodes because there are a lot right now. It's very powerful, but we are going to see how we can create one from scratch, how I'm using the project in a real game, vertical slice, in our hands-on. Okay. Any questions, please send it to the chat or the QA we have in the Zoom, I believe. Miguel would be following us later. And then I can cover these questions and follow up on you, okay? So right now, instead of, staying here in those slides, I'm actually going to minimize here. Let me minimize everything. And we are going to check now a shaded graph and what I'm doing in the project. And as you see here, I have many projects, but changing already to my game. I need to do this, otherwise it will just keep popping up here. Okay, so I'm using 19.4 LTS, so that means it's already the long-term support version of Unity. This is Unity was going to keep this to support this version for the next 2 years. So we'll be pretty much covered in possible bugs and fixes and also updates. And I'm using the universal render pipeline. If I go here, project settings, graphics, you can see here and also here that I'm using the universal render pipeline. And universal render pipeline, you can already choose to create one when you go here to Unit Hub and get a new latest version. And you can already choose here from the Unit Hub. I already have the project. I'm going to go here, and well, we do have a lot of materials, articles and also videos about how you can work with universal render pipeline. We're not going to cover this today, but I'm using universal render pipeline, and be sure this is optimized already and working really good in this render. Okay, before I really go deep in the shader, let me hit play in my game and show what I'm actually doing here. So this is no, I was working with the shader. This is a mix of RTS game and tower defense. I just hit pause here. It's a simple game. It's not really complicated. I'm using many features of Unity that I can discuss it later. Will be my Go project for any different talks to learn and to teach, developers like you to use some of these features in Unity. So here I pause it, and I have like free move in my scene view. It is a small map. It's an entire level array, and the goal is for me to build, my buildings here, train some unities, and reach the end of the map. So my units needs to reach here, this flag, the red flag, to win the level. Okay, so that's my goal. That's my game objective. At the same time, the enemy will be trying to do the same. They need to get their units and reach my flag. So if they do that, I lose. Also, if I lose all my morale, I also lose the game. And each unity I lose, I'm going to lose 1 point of morale. So that's pretty much the goal of the game. So just build. I can make gold with farm. So let me just show a little bit about the game very quickly. So I can show here what I want to build. There are some nice camera effects, when I did something. It's instant build. I did not want to wait for, building times. And each of these farms is going to generate some gold for me. And I'm going to build some barracks here so I can train some units. Just showing the game a little bit. And let me hit pause. So the enemies are already starting to spawn, units. I have here 4 buildings. Farm is to generate gold. Barracks is to train units. Defense tower, I can train archers, but also it will shoot some arrows in my enemy. And also I have a magic tower here. I can't build it yet. I don't have enough gold. But magic towers will pretty much train wizards and to shoot magic missiles. And one of the things I'm using Shadergraph here, actually all these buildings are already using my Shadergraph. So I'm not using the default material for Universal Render Pipeline. The default shader for the Universal Render Pipeline. I'm using already my own. And when I click here, can you see the tower gets selected? This is done by Shadergraph. So one of the big advantages of using Shadergraph, it's because it relies on the GPU instead of the CPU. So you're not going to use the CPU resources when you're doing Shadergraph. And then you can split, all the heavy load of your game in Shadergraph and then your code. And it is always good, you all know that, to be smart on the performance. This project will also be used for a performance talk that I'm creating. So it's not the best optimized, game yet. It will be. I'm going to explain a little bit more about the game later. But the point here is to show you that these buildings are all on Shadergraph, and also when I select this flash here, it's also on the Shadergraph. Okay, so the enemies are coming. Let me hit play here to show a little bit more the game. I'm not going to fight, but to create units. For now, I'm just showing you the level. I can show more about the game later. So the enemy will spawn some waves in a given time. And yeah, they will attack anything that comes near them. They are always attacking. When I create my units, I can pretty much, let me create a little bit more here just to defend myself. I can create my units here and I can order them to attack or defend when they are spawned. Okay, I have also here a button to, as a shortcut to throwing all units possible. Here you can see in moving my tower that I'm creating a unity. I hope it gets, created on time. Okay. Yeah, and I have some also nice effects here, like some slow motion. I can also pause and see what's actually happening in the game. And as I told you, this project will be publicly available soon. But because we have a nice partnership with ADVA, it will be available for ADVA members before it gets actually released public. So I'm going to talk about this later. You have to check with Miguel. But anyway, so this is the game. Let me just increase the speed here. So they're attacking. So all these buildings, they have the shader already in as their shader in their material. And also when I select, this is another shader activated. Let me hit pause, because now I want to show actually what's happening here. So first, let me select this guy. So this tower, it's my archer tower. And let me try to zoom here with my tool. You can see when I select this game object, and it has a mesh renderer, and this mesh renderer has a material. It's an instance of my existing material, so when I click, nothing will happen. I'll explain when I go out of the game. But this material has this shader, which I'm calling SG for Shadergraph default, which is a shader I created myself. And it's pretty much very similar to the default lit shader from Universal Random Pipeline. So for now, to not get so much complicated. So how I'm actually doing that, and how I'm actually using in my gameplay mode. So first, let me get one of the buildings that I have here. It's already, this building is a prefab. I'm using some Text Mesh Pro, some colliders. I'm not going to explain all of that. I'll focus here on the Shadergraph, but if you have questions later, we can discuss. So here in my my prefab, you can see this is a variant prefab. Since I'm in 19, I can already use nested prefabs. I can also use the variant prefabs. You can see for this icon here. And inside this building, let me actually unpack. I don't want this, to break anything. I just want the tower. Let's focus here on the graphics. So the body of the tower, it comes with the renderer, the mesh filter, and here my material. In my material, I have this Shadergraph applied. If I change to the default one from URP, you can see here lids. You can see that it doesn't change too much. Also, I keep with the same textures here. And this is the first tip and suggestion that I give for you. If you want to create a shader that is compatible at some level with the default universal render, the lit from universal render pipeline, always make sure you have the same names when you create your shader. I'm going to show how to create very soon. So how can I do this? If I right click here, since I have the shader selected, I can go select shader and click lit. Here in your right, you're going to see all the names, and the types of each node that we have in the shader graph. Like, so for texture, the default name is base map. So I'm using the same name when I create my own shader. And after this tip, let's see how actually I'm doing that. So in my project, I divided everything. So this is my entire game. These are folders that I'm using, for unit assets. So these assets are all free. Some of them are in asset store. And then I have general assets, and where I created my shader graph here. Let me open the default one. So don't get scared or be afraid if you think this is very complicated. It is not. When we are going to see what is going on here. So when you create a new shader graph, it already comes with a master, with a PBR master. If you create a PBR, you can create some unlit shaders. There are some other types coming, but it already comes with this one. And here I also have my main preview. So I can pretty much load a mesh, a sphere, or something that I want to check here, as a preview. And there are many different nodes and also subgraph that I connected here. Okay, so this is like simulating the same default shader that I have already for the universal render pipeline. I'm not going to explain each of these nodes. We have many talks. I'm going to show you a few links later where you can access that, where you can learn all this. The goal here is to learn, okay, this is how you build, and this is how you connect it to the gameplay, when I selected in my game. So we're going to see how we create one and how we can connect that same shader in our script. So this is the default that I'm using, but actually, sorry, I forgot to explain here. So I have here a group, so a base map. We're going to see how can we group. And this is connected to the albedo, which is pretty much the main channel for the texture. Here, these nodes are responsible to show the normal map. You can see here that it's connecting to the normal node. The emission is disabled. I'm going to explain this soon. And now the metallic and smoothness. And I also have here one that I actually, this guy here, imported, which is a subgraph. So if I double click this, it's going actually to open the subgraph, which is another graph that I created, you know, to show, to highlight when I click a building in my game. Okay, I just wanted to show the default one, but how can we do all that? So here in our project view, right click, create, shader, and we have already a few options here. Oh, remember, Shadergraph is already working for 2D projects, okay? It's not just for 3D. I'm not going to cover the 2D part here, but it's very similar to the one we're doing right now. And today I'm going to show the PBR graph and also a little bit about the subgraph soon, but not the VFX one, which we can pretty much work with particles and some other renderers. So to create a new one, PBR graph, I'm going to rename it SG, and I'm going to name this building. Okay, and remember I have this, you know, this tower here, and I'm using the default shader for the universal render pipeline. Oh, but how can you know this is default? If I go here, create a new material, math test, you can see here that it comes with the universal render pipeline lit. Okay, there are a few others here, and we're not going to deep dive on that. So this is the default shader for my, you know, default materials. So I created the new one that I'm calling building. I'm going to double click, and it's going to open here my shader graph for us. So as I told you, it comes already with the PBR master. So this is like to the output, or, you know, all the settings that you need to show the textures, some values, everything that you can expose in your unit editor. Here you have what we call the blackboard. If you don't see here, there's this button, and also the main preview. And this is our default view of Shadergraph. So here, SG building is the name of my graph. And here, if you can see here, Shadergraph, you can double click, and this will be the name of the shortcut when you right click to create your own shader. So let's change it, let me change here for my test. Okay, so if I just save this as it is right now, let me go back here, and let me create a new material, just show it very quickly, test again. I don't think it will show here, oh yeah, we can see it here. Oops, I clicked it wrong. Here, so you can see that there's already here my test SG building, okay, because I renamed this guy to my test, you know, the group, and this is my new shader. So there are, if you hit space or right click create node, there are a bunch of nodes that you're going to see here, all of them as their own abilities or their own properties. Let's create one very simple, because then I can go back to the other shader graph. But let's create one just for you to see how can let's create and expose, you know, the properties, and then we can access through code. So the first one I want to create is what we call Simple Texture 2D. And remember, later I'm going to provide you some links that you can check many of those. So this node is responsible to actually convert a texture to a texture 2D that will be converted here to our graph. And what we can do here to connect and to actually load a texture. So here in my blackboard, there's this button. I can add, you know, a bunch of different settings. I'm going to choose textures 2D, texture 2D. The name will be base map, or you can name whatever you want, like main texture, maybe. And here, can you see this name reference? So if you change it here, remember, this is the name of actually the field for the main texture. So if I want to change my shader later and keep the same reference, like the same textures or the same normal map or whatever I already set that came from the default universal random pipeline, I need to use the same name. And I know the same name is base map. And how I know that? I'm saving it again. I showed it before, but let me show it here again. So I select the material. This is the base shader. Right click, select shader. I can see here the default one for my universal random pipeline. And you can see here the name for the texture albedo. That's the one that connects, you know, in our default one. The name is called underscore base map. Okay, so that's how I know the default names. And you know, if you want to just make sure it will be changed later and it will keep the same reference, make sure you use the same names. Okay. Okay, so I create a new property and it's a texture 2D, as you can see here, the type. So I can now click, hold, and drag and drop here in my graph field. Now I can connect here, you know, to this simple texture node. Another way to create is if you want to drag and drop and you release, it's going to show you a few options to create. I don't want that because I already have my own here. And now here I have some, you know, different settings. I'm not going to cover here the precision. Precision. There are a lot of different, you know, settings and really powerful things for you to do here. And I'm going to provide you links for you to check this later. Now I can connect to this RGBA to my albedo, and we already have a way, you know, to show our texture in our preview. But this one is not really good. Let me right click, custom mesh. No, not farm. I don't know. I forgot the name. Is not farm here, body. So you can pretty much select any mesh in your project already. Okay, so let me rotate here and let me hit save. You can see nothing here because there's actually no texture loaded. So let me click here. Let's load a new texture, you know, just for us to see how it will show in our preview. Okay, so this is a very basic way to create a node and a new shader. And if you check all these nodes, you're going to see that's the same way how I did the default one. And just to show a little bit, one thing more here, let's say if I want to, I don't know, to, this is like not very organized, right? You can drag and drop all the nodes that you want, and then right click, group selection. And then you can rename this like base map. Now it's more organized here. Pretty much, let me save that I have here in my default. Okay, so this is the way that I did here to create my default base map. So the difference between the one that we just created and this is that there are a few more nodes just to expose more variables and you know, to for me to have more ways to customize my shader. Like here, I had time and offset. If I want to draw more times of my texture in my map, so I can use this time and offset to do that, I can connect this to the UV. And then if I want to add a color to it, like here I have a base color, as you can see. And the base color is the color type property. And in this preview, I can change the color and you're going to see applied in our mesh preview here. Okay, and then I grouped all this. I did the same for the normal one. The difference for a normal, you can see it's a sample texture, but you need to set type normal. Unity will know you want this for normal maps. The same for emission and the metallic one. Okay, so one of the things I did that is different is, let me go back. I have here a subgraph that I'm calling highlight, which is pretty much, you remember when I was playing and I selected the tower and it was highlighted, it was in another color, it had an emission. So I use a subgraph for that. And what's the advantage and the difference for using a subgraph? Let's create one here. So right click, create shader, subgraph. Let's call this SVG. I like this name. So for subgraphs, underline building highlight. That's the name I want. Okay, so double click. It's going to open my graph view. Oh, it's showing this every time because when I was in the checking the other graph, I did not save. So it's asking me if I want to save. So can you see now there's a different node here. It's not a PBR master. It's because we are doing a subgraph. It actually needs an output or what I want to expose to be used in other graphs. Okay, and you can see here if you click the setting, you can expose as many outputs as you want. Okay, and there are different types, different properties. So that's how let me minimize this. That's how you can expose some different variables. So let's do like the same that I did for the highlight. So the highlight effect is pretty much, I want to have an emission color when I click a building, and the emission will be applied for my entire renderer, my entire mesh renderer. So let's create a new node. There's one graph, one node, call it Fresnel. Okay, and well, it will work pretty much for us perfectly. So I want to create an exposed property so I can change in my editor, right? So right click here again, vector1, because I just need an information. I'm going to call this power. Okay, you can see here there's no reference name because this guy here, this SVG building highlight, will not be the one that I select for my material. That's why it doesn't have the name here, because I'm going to create in my actual exposed shader, my exposed shader graph. This is a subgraph. That's why I don't have that name. Okay, so I'm going to drag and drop this here. And since it's a float, I can apply the power. And remember, you can name it whatever you want. And I'm going to drag and drop here to my out vector 4. Okay, and this type is actually a vector with 4 positions for positions. And for now, I'm going to leave it as this. I'm not going to change it much. I just want to give you an example so we can check the code. Okay, so save. Now I have a new subgraph here. But how I can work with this value, and how can I actually, see this being applied in my project? I'm not going to implement color here. We can see about the color layer. But anyway, so save, Control S or save asset. I'm pressing here to open Shift tab, Shift space. Okay, so remember in Unity, if you have the mouse in one of the windows, Shift space will pretty much maximize it. So now I have this new subgraph that I created, and also this new SG building graph. Let's get back to our SG building here. So the one we just created. So remember, instead of we just create a bunch of nodes, bunch of different variables, we can now include that subgraph here. So let's say if I have different members in my team, one of them, were
Alex, te perdimos.
there will be no conflicts, will not be working directly. Yeah, go on.
No, sorry, the last minute we lost you.
Oh, do you remember the part
Yeah.
Do you remember the part that you lost me?
Ah, sorry, 1 minute before.
Oh, okay. I would try to get back. I'm sorry, I'm not sure if it's my connection here. But anyway, I was explaining here that I created a new subgraph. It's similar to the one that I had. So just let's review this very quickly. So subgraph here, create shader subgraph. So I named it this building highlight. And the subgraphs are pretty much like let's imagine this as prefabs that you can connect to other graphs so you can reuse them. You can have different teams working on the subgraph, so it will not have complex. It's better for team workflow, and you can connect the subgraphs to different graphs later. So that's what I'm going to show. Before I was I don't know, frozen or something. So, and then here I created this Fresnel effect, which is a node already from Unity. So Fresnel. Okay, that's the one I created. I'm going to delete this. And also create a new property, call it power, which is a vector 1. And the default value, I want it as 1. And then I left click, hold, and release here. So I have this property exposed. Also, you can, I forgot to say this before, space or right click create node. You can go to your properties and see all your properties available here in your Blackboard. Okay. So I linked up these nodes, and now I'm exposing this node. If you click this small icon, all the outputs and inputs that you have here. Okay, so the output is that it's going for when you use the subgraph. I'm going to hit save. Now I'm going to get back to the building, you know, the basic the graph that I did, you know, just to show a texture. Now if I right click, create node, subgraphs, you can see all the subgraphs that it's already in my project. Okay, so I'm going to click the one I just created, and now you can see here the name and the variable exposed, the property that's already exposed here, so I can work with this. Okay, and then I can apply this effect here in my, you know, in my farm. And how can I do that? Now I need to create another property. Let's do the same, but instead of power, let me create highlight power. And I'm going to change the name now because this is a PBR graph that I can use in my material. I have the reference name. So let me change here to name underscore highlight. Okay, default value 1, and I can drag and drop here, connect to the power. And now I can connect you to the emission part here. And you can see here, it's already being applied in my preview. Okay, so remember, you can connect as many subgraphs as you want here in your project. Okay, so this was an example of how we can do this, but actually for us to see how can we do this in the gameplay, Miguel, I'm going to use a few more minutes, if that's okay.
Yes, of course, no problem.
Okay, great, great. I really want to show the code part and what we actually saw here. Okay, so we saw an example of creating a new PBR shader, PBR graph, and how can we create a simple, you know, subgraph. And I did the same here for my default one. So just have some different nodes. This is the same of the highlight that I just created, but I actually exposed two different properties, which is color and power. You just need to add the color later. And then here, there's this new guy. So what this new node is doing is pretty much I created a new property called highlight, which is a Boolean. Because I want to be just turned on only when I want. You can see here in the default, it's pretty much a true and a false. No, it's a Boolean property. So I want to turn it on when I want. This is also available. If I click here, my Shadergraph's default, you can see here there's the highlight button. Okay, not a button, it's a checkbox. But I only want to turn this on when, you know, in my code, when I select the building. Oh, I forgot to show you the basic graph that I created. So SG building, you can see it's all white because I'm applying the subgraph. I already connected. There's no option, you know, to turn it on or off. That's why it's always on. So for now, let me erase this this connection, save asset, and we can get get back here to our scene, you're going to see it's not being applied. Because I just want to show you that when I change it for my SG building to the default one from Unity, I don't lose the texture. And why is that? Because I'm using the same name. The same name for my property here, base map, that is the same name for my default shader for Universal Render Pipeline. Okay, so that is how we are using this one, but how we actually do this in our game in real time. So I don't need this guy anymore. Just wanted to use this as an example. Let me import here my prefabs, buildings. This is my barracks to build. And you can see here that I'm using, my SG building. Oh, I forgot to change it back. My Shadergraphs, SG default. And now I have the option here, highlight, which then default here, which is this node color branch. And that's how we're going to turn it on and off in my game. So let's do the same here for my SG building. No, I don't want to save. So now space or right click create node branch, which you can see this as an if else, in your code. And now I need another variable here, another property. Let's call it boolean. I'm going to call it highlight. And I'm going to call it also highlight, underscore highlight. Okay. Now I'm going to drag and drop this here. I want this to be my condition. And I want this, like, if it's true, I'm going to apply this effect. If it's false, nothing happens. And now I connect to the emission part. Okay. So now if I go to your default, hit on, it's turning on and off. Okay. Oh, let's organize this a little bit more. Select all of them, group selection, highlight effects. Oops, there's no Z here. Okay, so now I have a group, two groups. This is my very new graph that I want to use for my buildings. So now I can go here to my barracks, and I'm using the same material, for these different game objects. Let me change my new test, my new shader for my test here. Of course, I'm not going to see all the beautiful effects that I had before because I don't have other, properties and the textures available. I only have the highlight part that I wanted. Okay. So we created a new PBR graph. We created a new subgraph. We exposed some variables. Let's see how we can actually do this in code. Of course, I'm not going to show the entire project code. I will just show you how I can do this following, the game design or the game code that I did. So here in my code, I have a game manager script, which is pretty much handles, as you can see here, the mat setup, like the goal that I have, morale, all the game setup for like the buildings that I want to build. But the actual part that I want to see is, let me hit play here again. When I click my building, oh, by the way, I apply the shader. So the shader is now already in the game. Okay, it's not going to select because you're going to see that I'm actually not getting the right name of the variable. So when I click this guy, I want this building, let me hit pause and go to the building that I just created. I want this building to change, to make it, to highlight the object when I want. So that's what I want to do. When I select with my left mouse button, I want to highlight this. That I was actually doing the same before with the shader that I had. So let me go, let's check the code here now. And as I told you, I'm not going to show the entire code here. I just want to show you what I'm actually doing in the building part, okay? So let me go here to my building, to my code. So here in my handle selection function, it's where I'm going to click in any object in my scene and select the building. So if here I'm just checking, am I playing the game? If not, return. If I'm not in scene mode, return, which means I already selected something. Here I'm just checking if I am over in any UI. So I don't want to, to build something when I want to actually click a button. So that's what I'm checking. And here I want, okay, if I right click, cancel selection. I don't want to select anything here in my scene if I right click. And if I left click, so this is a shortcut that you have in your input system, I want to cast a ray from my camera. And this ray will actually go, to all layers I want to actually click. So if you go here to selection layers, so available selection layers. So all the layers that I want to actually click, which is ground, which is, the terrain, and building, which is pretty much, any building that I have, it's in this layer. And then, okay, I'm in the same layer. So did I hit something that it's a tag from my team glue, my player? So this is my own game logic. Okay, there are a number of ways that you can do this in your own game logic. So don't worry if you do any other way. And then there's this function here that, okay, I want to select this building and I want to get this script. Okay, so let me check here. So everything that I need to check now is in these few lines of code. So the building selected is pretty much my building behavior script. So if I go here, building behavior, which is the script that I have. Oh, I did a change, it's compiling. But it's a script that I have on all my buildings. So all my buildings has a building behavior, as you can see here. Okay, and so in this script, I'm not going to check the entire script, but I have a function. Where's my function here? Call it building selected toggle. So it's pretty much I'm checking all my renders. I got this guy, from the very beginning. Here in my code in the start. So I just, okay, I want to get all the renders in my game object. Because some objects, it does have more than one render, as you can see here. And then in all these guys, I want to get the materials, all the materials. And this is how you can actually set or change different properties values. Remember that I create a Boolean. In Shadergraph, a Boolean can be set actually by a float, okay? You don't have a set Boolean here, only set float or set color. There are a number of different functions that you can change here in real time, okay? So just check it, we have more in documentation. And this is how you change here. Let me go back. This is how you change all the properties here in your Blackboard, okay? And remember that I told you, you need to remember this name. You need to remember all this name. And this is how, what I'm doing here. When I want to set float, I have this variable that this is just a shortcut. I could just, add a string there, but this is a shortcut because it's better organized. But let's forget about this now. And instead of using this guy, I can do this. Okay, so here it's just telling me, oh, I have a better idea for performance and blah, blah, blah. But you can just leave it as here. And okay, I want to set this float, which is my property name here. You see, from, it's very bad for me to zoom in now. From like, okay, if I'm selected, I want to change it to 1. If I'm not, I want to change it to 0. Okay, so this is a shortcut. Programmers are lazy, but I could just do if so, like, then 1. Okay, if not, then 0. It's pretty much the same thing as this line, just to explain for you. Okay, so and that's how I'm changing my property here in real time. When I select I want this guy to change in real time the object that I have here in this line. So here I'm just telling, oh, if I have someone other already, selected, turn it off, then I will turn it on. Okay, this is in my own game logic. Remember, you can apply in your own game logic in your game. This is just an example that I'm doing here. And now that I did this, let's, no, not this guy, I was testing this one. And I'm using the SU building. And oh, I just saw here, that's why it did not work. So it changed it already the name because my subgraph, it has a, not my subgraph. I already have the same name here in my power. So I'm going to do this highlight, change effects, just for you to see the difference, okay? Save asset. Now I'm going to my script. My building behavior in my shader highlight will actually be change effects. Okay, so that's how we can do, like, can change a property from a shader graph in real time. So now if I go here, let me create this new building. Okay, barracks, and let me select this guy so we can see here. So when I click, you can see that it's changing here the property for us. Okay, so this is an example how we can use this in real time. That's what I wanted to show you here today. I know there's no real, like, good time to show everything, the entire game, but this project will be available publicly soon. I'm going to talk with Miguel, so Miguel, for ADVA members, he can send the link before everyone else, so you can download the project and test all by yourself. Okay, so just a few more resources. So here are a few links that you can, learn more about Shadergraph. So there are some nice talks covering really, like, oh, how can I create this effect, or how can I, create a distortion map, or make something move like the wind. So there are many materials more than these ones actually. I just wanted to provide something to start. Also, in our blog, there are a few articles explaining in more detail. The goal today was really to show, okay, just to understand a little bit how can actually create inside the editor. And because some of these talks that we have in articles, they explain too much in depth, and we don't have too many examples like in a real game. So I really want to show you in a real project and a project that we are creating, how we can actually use and change this property in real time, during your development. Okay, so that was it for today. It was a little bit rushy, Miguel. I'm sorry about that because there are so many things to cover, but I'll be glad to answer any questions if you have.
Yes, well, thanks for all your knowledge and experience, and to share with the community, with our community. Thanks a lot. We have some questions. I have one. What other features are you using in the game?
So this game, I'm using like a universal render pipeline. I'm also using animation for. Let me get here the building for so I can show you. But let me actually change this guy to my normal shader before I forget. So here I'm going to hit play so I can show all the features. So first of all, it's in URP, Universal Render Pipeline. Second is I'm using the post-processing that is actually already in Universal Render Pipeline. So if you can go here, scene effects, let me hit pause, post-processing. So I'm using, so you can see the difference when it's on and off. Post-processing from Universal, running in Universal Render Pipeline. Also, in buildings, when I build something, and I'm click here. Let me train in Unity. You can see this moving. This is actually, I hate this Zoom window here. And you can see in the components, I have an animator, which is pretty much, and let me try and drop here, an animation that is playing, you know, the animation that we had before. So this is another feature that I'm using. I'm using a lot of particles that it's available in the asset store. I'm using, as you can see here, the Unity terrain, using the terrain tools. I'm also, I don't know why this window is changing a lot. You know, applying some optimization with the depth of field. There are some LODs here that are also, I'm using scriptable objects to load everything regarding, you know, buildings or units. Also, I have a localization system, so developers can have an idea, or one way, there are a lot of ways for doing that, that you can implement localization. So this game will be localized to Portuguese and Spanish also. Yeah.
Okay.
Besides that, just to explain a little bit more, there's this text file inside the project. So you can see all the features that it will be available here. So post-processing, input, like, you know, script objects and everything, like the description of the project that you can check later. Yeah.
Great. Well, other question from Marcos. Is it possible to create animate or procedural textures through the Shadergraph editor?
Yeah, you can animate. I just did not have time to show everything here, but we do have some nice videos covering that. You can animate, not really animate like a character, but you can animate textures or create some nice, you know, wind animation using Shadergraph. You can also manipulate vectors or meshes with the Shadergraph. So you probably can create some nice animations for that, but not like animating, moving a character or something like that. Maybe you can, depending on how you use the nodes, but I don't think that would be ideal. Yeah.
Okay. And other question from Franco, sorry. It's more of a personal question, but how many years does you have in the game development field, Alex?
Oh, game development, I think 9 years already. I created this project in 2 weeks, maybe total 6 or 7 hours, something like that. This entire project. But yeah, I've been using Unity since Unity was not even available for Windows.
Okay.
Yeah.
And does Shadergraphs go well with high definition render pipeline?
Yes, it was actually available first for high definition. Universal render pipeline came after that. Well, so it works really well. Many of the, you know, the big demos that we showed you in the past, like the last months, the heretic or the character from the heretic animation, there were many Shadergraphs in those projects.
Great. And other, it's a question non-relation with Shadergraph, but also with SRP in general. Okay. Juan Cruz asked you, would you, it's a bit large, would you really on SRP for a midterm project?
Yeah, for sure. I would even use SRP for small projects. Universal Render Pipeline is actually intended for mobile and VR games or even small projects. It can be used for big projects. We have some examples for a few companies using that. But you can use Universal Render Pipeline for, you know, small to medium projects, even bigger ones. If you want to create something with a high quality, like for graphics, heavy on graphics, then we recommend using the high definition render pipeline because it has more features, it's more optimized, you have more like lightning options, you have more options in the post-processing, how it works. So it's just better for bigger projects, the high definition render pipeline. But if you're creating a small or medium one, Universal Render Pipeline is really good.
Okay, the fact is that Juan Cruz is talking about it's that in the last version of Unity 2019, 0.3.5, well, he ended up investigating more time finding workarounds for bugs than making his project. Yeah, and well, or expanding the set of shaders available. Once I detect the bugs were Unity's bugs, they replied and fixed them pretty fast as long as you are willing to switch to the last alpha release with the bug fix.
Okay, I would love to know more. If you can, get in touch with me by email. Miguel, you can share my email with anyone that, asks you. I would love to know more and try to help.
Do you want to share with the guys your email here in the deck?
Oh yeah, we have. Let me hear the chat. I tried to write, but okay. Please, anyone, you can get in touch with me. I'm just playing the game, so yeah.
Great, Alex. Well, in the name of ADVA, I say you thank you so much for your time and this webinar. Very useful. We will continue having these sessions with Unity in the future. Maybe during July we can coordinate other webinar. And
yeah,
well,
sure.
Thank you so much. And you guys that were there, thank you so much for joining us, and well, keep in your homes and keep safe.
Sí, no hay problema. Muchas gracias, Miguel. Pero yo estoy muy contento también de estar aquí con todos ustedes.
Muy bien. Bueno, muchas gracias a todos y que sigan muy bien. Cuídense.
Muchas gracias.
Adiós.
Adiós.